Yesterday, in a strait 30 kilometers wide, a projectile from an unnamed shooter stopped a ship the length of 3 football fields. Its cargo? Natural gas, chilled to minus 162 degrees, bound from Qatar to the open sea. The engine room went dark, the ship lost power and drifted. The cargo was gas, but the first market to jump was oil because this strait carries both. Oil made its biggest jump since March. Every news channel is covering the strike, the strait, the war around it. We're going to ask a quieter question. On the day a gas ship stops in that strait, what is Europe's written plan? Because there is one, a law passed after the last gas crisis, and its core fits on one line, a number and a date, 90% by the 1st of November. Fill the storage tanks. For oil, Europe has had a plan far longer, since 1974, and that one fills a book, how much to store, but also who opens the tank, on what signal, in what order, and how countries share. The difference between how much is stored and how it gets out is the difference between a reserve and a number. Today, we trace how Europe wrote page 1 and never wrote the book. Here is what happened to the hour we recorded this. On the 1st of August, the tanker Gaslog Shanghai was hit by what its manager called an unknown projectile while passing the Strait of Hormuz. Bermuda flag Greek management, a cargo loaded in Qatar. The engine room was damaged, the ship blacked out and could no longer steer. No one was hurt and no cargo leaked. The same day, another tanker nearby reported an explosion in the water close to its hull, a near miss. This is the second strike on Qatari gas in a month. After the first, Qatar, one of the largest gas exporters on earth, suspended shipments through the strait for 3 weeks. About a fifth of the world's seaborne gas passes through this one strait, and analysts estimate roughly a tenth of Europe's imported liquefied gas is exposed to it. We took this strait apart in an earlier episode. Let's know the choke point itself and how insurance premiums, not navies, are what actually closes the strait. Today is about the receiving end, what waits at home. Because when a route this size stutters, the question stops being what happens out there and becomes what did we build at home for this exact day? Start with a machine that exists, the one built for oil. In 1973, Arab producers embargoed the West and fuel queues wrapped around city blocks. The response within a year was not a slogan, but an institution, the International Energy Agency, and a binding agreement with a number in it. Every member country holds oil stocks worth at least 90 days of the oil it buys in from abroad. But the 90 days is only page 1. The rest of the book is what makes it a reserve, a defined trigger, what counts as a supply emergency, a release procedure, who opens the tanks, in what order, at what pace, and coordination. Members act together, so no country's release just refills a neighbor's shortfall. The machine has been used for real after Iraq invaded Kuwait, after Hurricane Katrina wrecked the Gulf refineries, after Libya's supply collapsed, and again in 2022, each time for oil. Hold on to the definition this history teaches. A reserve is a stock plus the rules for using it. The stock is the easy half. The rules, trigger, order, ownership, sharing are the half that works at 3 a.m. during a crisis. Oil got both halves half a century ago. Now look at what gas got. Gas got its crisis in 2022 when Russian pipelines went quiet and Europe scrambled. And Europe did write a law quickly. It says every autumn, storage must be 90% full by the 1st of November. As a target, it is beautifully designed. One number, one date, publicly tracked, politically enforceable. Storage was filled so what now, the target has been met every year since. But notice the base. Oil's 90 counts days of imports. Gas's 90 counts percent of the tanks. A full tank by itself tells you nothing about how many days it buys you. Now look for the rest of the book. A trigger called shortage, not defined. A release order. Who gets the stored gas first? Hospitals, factories, or a neighboring country in worse trouble? Not written, and the deepest gap, ownership. The gas in those tanks mostly belongs to private traders who filled them for commercial reasons. In a crisis, it is their gas. and it will flow to whoever pays most. The state watches a gauge on a tank it does not own, and the number on a date came with its own bill. In 2022, everyone raced to fill tanks at once, European countries bidding against each other and against the world. The benchmark gas price touched €340 per megawatt hour. The decade before, it averaged between 5 and 35, call it 10 times the old ceiling. Europe spent €116 billion on liquefied gas in a single year, and ships contracted for poorer countries were diverted mid-route to the higher bidder. Their blackouts helped finance our percentage. The meter was satisfied. The mechanism was never written. Europe saw these gaps. 3 of them got patches: the bidding race, the question of who helps whom, and the price spike. Read what each patch is made of. The bidding against ourselves problem got a joint purchasing platform, a pilot. Companies posted their demand together, 90 billion cubic meters. The unit doesn't matter. Watch the shape. 90 posted, 77 matched with sellers. And how much was actually signed into contracts as far as anyone reported? Of the short-term slice, about 1. Matchmaking is not buying. The pilot ended. Its successor is, in the law's own words, a permanent, voluntary tool. The who helps whom problem got a solidarity rule. Neighboring countries were to sign mutual rescue agreements. 40 were expected. The rule is older than the 2022 crisis, almost a decade old now. 9 agreements exist. Brussels has since written default fallback terms so that help has a legal path even without a signature on paper. And the price spike problem was actually fixed last year. The rule was made flexible. The 90% can now be reached any time over a 2-month window, and countries may fall short by up to 10 points in a bad market, so the filling race no longer detonates prices. Note what was amended: the peacetime chapter. The wartime chapter, trigger, release, ownership, still does not exist. The law even allows the tanks to be drawn down the day after the target is touched. Meanwhile, the bidding war that filled Europe's tanks has changed sides. Since late last year, Asian buyers outbid European ones. And since Hormuz seized up, that gap has widened. The same contest that once worked for Europe now works against it. 3 repairs are on the table. Each attacks the missing book from a different side, and each has a price we will read out loud. Repair 1 finishes the oil book for gas. Governments take a strategic slice of storage into public hands, owned outright or held under option, and Parliament writes the missing pages in advance. What counts as an emergency, who opens the tanks, in what order the gas flows, and how countries coordinate, the way oil members have since 1974. The price. An insurance stock buys high and sells low by design. That is what insurance is, and it ties up billions in gas that mostly sits still. A public stock also crowds out the private one. Why should a trader pay for winter storage when the state stands behind the market? And a written trigger hands speculators a map. The moment the market nears the point where the state must act, everyone trades against the state's next move. Repair 2 stores something cheaper than gas, the right to not consume it. Industrial users, fertilizer, glass, ceramics, sell the state an option priced in calm markets. In a declared emergency, we power down by this much for this compensation. Electricity grids have run on such interruptible contracts for decades. The reserve is not molecules in a cavern. It is a signed, pre-priced list of demand that switches off in order instead of a price shock choosing the victims chaotically. The price. You pay industry every year for a readiness you almost never use. The state ends up deciding whose production is interruptible, industrial policy through the back door. And a factory wearing the Cut Me First badge starts reading relocation brochures. Repair 3 makes the crisis version of Europe a single customer. Joint purchasing that becomes mandatory when an emergency is declared, not a voluntary pilot, shared access to the ports where the gas comes ashore, wherever they stand, and solidarity with an automatic compensation formula so gas moves first and money follows by rule. The price. 27 governments must pre-commit to sharing fuel in the exact month none of them has enough. Solidarity that has never been tested by a real shortage. A single negotiator is a single point of failure and of lobbying, and binding and crisis rules need a crisis definition, which is the opening chapter of the book that was never written. Every repair pays somewhere. The design of a number and a date already paid its bill once in 2022. The patches came after, and the wartime chapter is still blank, so the bill is being reprinted now. Somewhere off the coast of Oman, a ship full of frozen gas is waiting for a tow. Europe's tanks, to be fair, are filling on schedule. The number will be met as it has been met every year. That is genuinely worth something. Page 1 usually is. But you now know the question that separates a reserve from a number, and it works on any strategic stockpile any government ever shows you. Gas, grain, medicine, chips. Don't ask how much is stored. Ask for the rest of the book. Who opens it, on what signal, in what order, and who owns what's inside. If the answer is the market will decide on the day, then what you are looking at is not a plan. It is a hope with a deadline. Europe has fixed how it fills. It has never rehearsed the day it must draw the gas back out, and the last time those pages were missing, the market wrote the bill at 340 euros per megawatt hour.